Maya Williams stood at the entrance of the hotel lobby, the polished marble floors reflecting the soft lighting from above. It was a beautiful evening, and the Grand Hotel seemed like the perfect place to unwind after a long week. She wore a simple, elegant dress, her black heels clicking softly with each step she took. Despite her calm demeanor, there was a quiet excitement within her. She had been working hard lately and wanted nothing more than to enjoy a few days of peace and relaxation. But little did she know, her arrival would lead to an unexpected series of events. As Maya made her way toward the reception desk, she noticed the elegant surroundings, the crystal chandeliers, the plush velvet chairs, and the soft hum of conversation from other guests. There was an air of exclusivity in the hotel, and it was clear that it catered to a wealthy clientele. Maya wasn't out of place, but something about the way the staff moved around her made her feel like she was being watched. At the front desk, the hotel manager, a woman in her late 40s with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude, looked up from her computer as Maya approached. She flashed a professional smile, but there was something about the way her gaze lingered on Maya's attire, simple yet graceful, that made Maya pause for a moment. The manager, whose name was Claire, scanned Maya from head to toe, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly as if trying to figure out whether Maya truly belonged in a place like this. "Good evening," Claire said, her voice cold but polite. "How may I assist you?" Maya smiled and handed her the reservation. "I have a booking for a few nights," she said calmly, her voice steady. "The name's Maya Williams." Claire took the reservation and quickly typed the name into the system. Her fingers paused over the keyboard, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Maya thought she noticed a flicker of doubt in Claire's eyes, but she dismissed it. Maybe she was just overthinking things. After all, she had every right to be here. "Ah, yes," Claire said, her voice still polite, but there was an underlying tone of uncertainty. "We've got your room ready. However, there seems to be an issue. You've booked a suite, but, it looks like there might have been some kind of mix-up with the payment. Let me just double-check everything." Maya raised an eyebrow, a hint of confusion creeping into her expression. "Mix-up? I've already paid in advance," she replied, her calm demeanor starting to crack slightly. She had always prided herself on being organized, and this wasn't like her at all. Claire gave a small, dismissive smile and repeated, "Let me just check it again." She turned her back on Maya for a moment, typing into the system once more. The minutes dragged on, and the hum of conversation around them seemed to grow louder. Maya felt the weight of the situation begin to press on her. She could sense that something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Why was Claire taking so long? After what felt like an eternity, Claire turned back around with a look that almost seemed like pity. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake," she said, her voice now tinged with a sense of finality. "You won't be able to stay in this suite. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Maya blinked, stunned. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice a little sharper now. "I have a reservation, and I've already paid." Claire's smile remained firmly in place, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I understand, but it seems like your booking was for another guest. Perhaps you've confused your reservation with someone else's. This room is for a more appropriate guest." The words hit Maya like a slap. She froze, her body tense as she tried to process what was happening. Was this really happening? She had been mistaken for someone who didn't belong? Her mind raced, but her voice remained steady. "There's no mistake. I'm Maya Williams. I have the booking confirmation right here." But Claire didn't even look at the papers in Maya's hand. Instead, she crossed her arms and gave Maya a dismissive glance. "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave, or I'll have no choice but to call security," Claire said, her tone firm now. The polite facade was gone, replaced by a cold, dismissive attitude. Maya's heart began to race. The sting of humiliation started to rise in her chest, but she refused to let it show. She knew she wasn't going anywhere, not without a fight. The murmurs of other guests, who were now watching the interaction with curious eyes, only added to her discomfort. She could feel their gaze on her, some sympathetic, others judgmental, but she didn't let it affect her. She was determined to remain calm. "I don't think you understand," Maya said slowly, her voice unwavering. "I'm staying here, and this is my reservation. I've had enough of this misunderstanding." She raised her hand, showing the manager the confirmation on her phone again. "This is my room. You are going to honor it." Claire's eyes narrowed, her smile gone entirely. "I think you need to leave now," she repeated, her voice cold. "I'm not going to ask again." Maya felt a fire ignite within her, but she didn't let it consume her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The situation was about to escalate, but she wasn't going to back down. Little did Claire know, Maya wasn't just any guest at the hotel. She wasn't just any woman who had walked in off the street. Maya Williams was the daughter of the city's mayor, a man whose influence reached far beyond the walls of this hotel. But Maya wasn't about to flaunt her family's name just yet. She wanted to see how far Claire would push before realizing her mistake. The tension in the air was thick as Maya stood her ground, quietly waiting for the manager's next move. Maya stood still, her gaze fixed on the hotel manager. But inside, her mind was racing. She had expected a relaxing stay, not this. The more she thought about the situation, the more she realized just how ridiculous it was. There was no reason for this. She had been calm and polite, and yet here she was, being treated like an intruder in her own hotel. The discomfort in the room grew as the minutes passed. Guests in the lobby shifted uneasily in their seats, exchanging whispers, clearly unsure of what was happening. Some even seemed curious, eager to see how it would play out. Claire, the hotel manager, stood with her arms crossed, her stance still unwavering. There was no apology in her voice, no acknowledgement of the fact that she could have been mistaken. She simply repeated, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave or I'll call security." The words hit Maya like a blow. She'd been humiliated, yes, but it wasn't about the embarrassment anymore. It was about the principle. It was about being treated with dignity. She couldn't believe the manager's audacity to assume she didn't belong here. And the more Maya thought about it, the more it irritated her. The hotel wasn't just any place. It was a luxury hotel, one that prided itself on providing an elite experience. But it seemed that, in Claire's eyes, Maya didn't fit the mold. Maya could sense that Claire was getting impatient, eager to get rid of her, to remove what she thought was an unwanted guest. But Maya wasn't backing down. She had been raised to face adversity head-on, to never let others define her worth. And now, more than ever, she needed to stand firm. "I'm not going anywhere," Maya replied, her voice calm but firm. She could feel the pressure building, but her posture remained steady. "I've booked this room. I paid for it. I belong here." Claire's eyes flickered with irritation, but she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her head slightly, as if trying to assess whether there was anyone who could back up her decision. Her gaze shifted toward a nearby staff member, a young man who looked like he was ready to intervene but seemed unsure of how to proceed. He glanced between the two women, clearly uncomfortable, but he stayed silent. Maya stood her ground. The longer Claire hesitated, the more the tension in the air thickened. Maya could almost hear the murmurs of the guests behind her, their quiet conversations drifting toward her like a wave. She knew the manager was starting to feel the weight of the situation, but it wasn't enough to stop her. Claire had made up her mind. She was determined to assert her control. "Security will handle this if you refuse to comply," Claire said, her voice now more forceful, no longer trying to hide the authority she thought she had over the situation. She stepped back toward the phone on the desk, ready to make the call, but just as she began to reach for it, Maya took a small step forward, her hand still gripping the reservation details tightly. "Before you do that," Maya said, her voice level and cool, "you might want to double-check one thing. My name is Maya Williams, and I have every right to be here. I don't think you fully understand who I am." The words hit Claire like a thunderbolt. For a moment she paused, and her eyes flicked back to Maya's face. Maya didn't flinch. She had known that her family's name might eventually come into play, but she wanted to see if Claire's assumptions would change, or if they would remain clouded by her prejudice. Claire blinked, the brief moment of hesitation catching Maya's attention. It was the first sign that Claire might be reconsidering, but it was also clear that the manager wasn't ready to accept the truth. Maya, however, was ready to take control of the situation. She could feel the tension in the air, could hear the soft gasps of the guests around her as they processed her words. Some exchanged knowing glances, others looked confused, but Maya wasn't waiting for their validation. She only needed one person to believe her, and she wasn't about to give up on that just yet. Claire didn't know it yet, but she was about to learn a very important lesson. Maya wasn't just any guest. She was the daughter of the city's mayor, a man whose influence reached far beyond this hotel. Claire was about to realize that her judgment had been horribly wrong. Maya didn't give Claire the chance to respond. Instead, she calmly reached for her phone and typed a quick message. "Dad, they're asking me to leave. They're saying there's a mistake with my reservation." She hit send before Claire could react, knowing that her father would not take kindly to this treatment. She didn't expect him to handle it immediately, but she knew he'd take action soon enough. That was the power of having someone in her corner. Still standing tall, Maya kept her eyes locked on the manager, who was now visibly flustered. Claire's confident air was beginning to crack as the realization dawned on her that Maya wasn't just another hotel guest to dismiss. But Claire still hadn't fully accepted what Maya was implying, and it seemed as though she was about to escalate the situation even further. Maya wasn't ready to back down. She knew the truth, and she knew that justice would be on her side. It was only a matter of time before everything changed. The moments dragged on in silence, but the air in the hotel lobby was thick with tension. Claire stood frozen, her hand still hovering over the phone, her face a mix of disbelief and defiance. Maya's words had clearly shaken her, but instead of apologizing or reconsidering, Claire doubled down on her position. Maya could feel the manager's discomfort, but she also sensed that the woman wasn't ready to accept her mistake. Not yet. Guests continued to watch, their eyes flicking between the two women, some clearly uncomfortable, others intrigued by what was unfolding before them. Maya stood her ground, her posture as composed as ever, her eyes steady and unwavering. She wasn't going to be intimidated, not here, not now. After a few long seconds, Claire finally spoke, her voice tighter than before. "I'm not sure what game you're trying to play here," she said, her tone sharp, "but you need to leave now. I'm calling security." Maya didn't flinch at the threat. She had heard it before, and she knew it was an empty one. "You're making a mistake," Maya replied, her voice cool but firm, "and I'm not going anywhere." Claire's frustration was palpable. She looked toward the staff member standing near the back of the lobby, silently signaling for help, but the young man didn't move. He had seen enough of the situation to know something wasn't right, but he wasn't sure how to intervene. The manager, meanwhile, seemed to grow more impatient with every passing second. Maya was beginning to feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but she refused to let it break her. Her father's words echoed in her mind, reminding her to remain calm in the face of adversity. "Always stand your ground," he had told her countless times. "Your dignity is yours to keep. No one can take that from you." Despite the growing humiliation, Maya held her head high. She was determined to maintain her composure, but at the same time, a fire burned within her. She couldn't believe how casually she was being dismissed, simply because of how she looked. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Not at Claire personally, but at the idea that anyone could be treated this way based on assumptions. Without waiting for Claire's next move, Maya took out her phone once again. She didn't need to explain further. She didn't need to say anything more. She simply typed a message and pressed send. Her father would act swiftly. Maya knew that he would handle it. Claire, still standing behind the desk, looked back at Maya as if she were waiting for her to back down. But when she saw Maya's unwavering expression, something in her shifted. Perhaps it was the sudden realization of who Maya really was, or perhaps it was the mounting discomfort of being caught in a situation she couldn't control. Either way, Claire's composure cracked for a moment, and Maya saw it, the first sign of doubt. But Claire didn't let it show for long. "Fine," Claire said through clenched teeth. "If you don't want to cooperate, I'll have no choice but to escalate this." She reached for the phone again, dialing security with a sense of finality. But just as Claire was about to hit the call button, Maya's phone buzzed in her hand. Her father had responded, "Stay calm, sweetheart. I'll handle it. Don't let them push you out." Maya's heart swelled with a sense of relief, knowing that her father would make this right. She didn't respond to him immediately. She simply put the phone down in her pocket, maintaining eye contact with Claire. The manager had no idea what she had just started. Claire's expression flickered when she saw the phone in Maya's hand. Something had shifted in the energy of the room. The realization that Maya was not just any guest had started to set in, but it was too late to take back what had already been done. Maya's voice was steady as she spoke, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. "My father is the mayor of this city," she said calmly, "and I promise you, he will not stand for this treatment. I don't know who you think I am, but I'm not the person you've decided I am. I'm Maya Williams, and I belong here. You don't have the right to treat me like this." The silence that followed was thick with realization. Claire's mouth opened, then closed again. Her gaze darted around the room as though searching for the words that could undo her actions. But no words came. The truth hung in the air, too heavy to ignore now. For a moment, Maya thought she might see an apology in Claire's eyes, but it never came. Instead, the manager straightened her posture, trying desperately to regain control of the situation. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes flashing with a mixture of disbelief and fear. "I didn't realize," Claire muttered, the words escaping her reluctantly. She paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." Maya didn't blink. She didn't smile. She didn't do anything but stand there, unwavering. "It's not a misunderstanding. It's just your assumptions." Claire hesitated once again, her eyes flicking toward the staff member, who was still standing awkwardly in the background, unsure whether to intervene. No one was stepping in to stop what was happening. No one was questioning the manager's behavior, and that, in itself, was its own form of discrimination. Maya wasn't just being mistreated by Claire. She was being ignored by everyone around her. But Maya wasn't concerned with the others. She was concerned with one thing, making sure she was heard. And she had just made sure that Claire would never forget who she was. Claire's grip on the phone tightened, her fingers trembling slightly as the weight of Maya's words settled in. She hadn't expected this. Maya wasn't just some ordinary guest. She was the daughter of the mayor, someone who held real power in the city. The realization hit Claire like a wave, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. She had made her decision, and now she was too far in to admit she was wrong. But the fear in her eyes betrayed her confidence as she stared at Maya, unsure of how to proceed. The silence in the lobby stretched on, thick with tension. The guests, who had been whispering quietly among themselves, were now completely silent. It was clear that everyone had sensed a shift in the dynamic. Some cast curious glances at Maya, while others avoided eye contact altogether, not wanting to get involved. But one thing was certain. The atmosphere had changed. Maya remained calm. She didn't flinch or show any sign of frustration. She wasn't about to let her dignity slip, no matter how unjust the situation was. She knew her father would handle this, but part of her wanted to see how far Claire would push before admitting her mistake. It wasn't just about getting the room, it was about proving that prejudice, no matter where it came from, shouldn't go unchallenged. For a moment, Maya thought Claire might finally give in. The manager's eyes darted nervously to the side, as if she were looking for an escape. But instead of backing down, Claire straightened up and made a decision. Her voice was less certain now, tinged with a subtle note of hostility, as if trying to reassert her authority in the only way she knew how. "Ms. Williams," she said, her tone no longer polite but defensive, "I understand you're upset, but this is a matter of hotel policy. I'm just following the rules. You can either leave now or I'll have security escort you out." Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. The manager's words were no longer about the mistake. Now it was about saving face. Maya could feel the room holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. The tension was palpable. Claire was cornered, but she wasn't ready to admit it. She thought she could still control the situation, but Maya knew better. Maya was no longer just a guest. She was a force to be reckoned with. "I've told you I'm not leaving," Maya said, her voice unwavering. "I've paid for my stay, and I have every right to be here. Your rules don't apply when they're used to judge people unfairly." Her words were steady and firm, but there was an undeniable strength in them. Maya wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for everyone who had been treated like they didn't belong. Claire's eyes flicked nervously over to the young staff member again, and for a split second, Maya thought she might have seen something akin to doubt in the manager's eyes. But it quickly disappeared, replaced by a cold, determined mask. She wasn't ready to back down, not yet. "Security is on the way," Claire said, her voice tinged with a forced calmness. But even as she spoke, her eyes were no longer on Maya. They were scanning the lobby, as though she were trying to find a way to salvage the situation. But Maya wasn't giving her that option. Maya pulled out her phone again, her fingers moving swiftly over the screen. She didn't need to say much more. Her father's influence would handle the rest. She hit send and waited for the response. She wasn't concerned about the manager's threats anymore. She had learned long ago that no one could take away her sense of self-worth, no matter how hard they tried. The only thing left now was waiting for the inevitable fallout. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. The response was brief but clear. "I'm on it. Stay calm." Maya slipped the phone back into her bag, her expression unchanged. Claire, still standing behind the desk, had begun to fidget. Her confidence had slipped, but she was determined to keep control, even though she could feel the weight of her decision crushing her. The tension in the lobby was almost unbearable. Guests continued to watch, some with expressions of disbelief, others more sympathetic toward Maya, but no one intervened. There was a part of Maya that wished someone would step in, someone who could challenge the manager's authority. But at the same time, she knew that this moment wasn't about others. It was about her, and about proving that no one should ever be dismissed or judged based on the color of their skin or their appearance. Claire's eyes flicked toward the entrance, where two security guards were walking toward them. Maya recognized them immediately. They were regulars at the hotel, and she had seen them around before. But she wasn't intimidated. She wasn't going to let anyone dictate her place here. She belonged. She belonged just as much as anyone else in this hotel. As the security guards reached the desk, they glanced at Maya, their faces neutral, but Maya could see the hesitation in their eyes. They were just doing their job, but they were also caught in the middle of something they hadn't expected. Claire stepped forward, clearly relieved to have backup, but her movements were stiff and forced. She cleared her throat. "I'm afraid this guest refuses to leave," Claire said, her voice now full of authority, but it was clear that the confidence behind her words was faltering. "Please escort her from the premises." Maya didn't budge. She didn't even glance at the security guards. Instead, she looked directly at Claire, her eyes calm and resolute. You really think you can kick me out without even trying to understand what's going on? She asked, her voice low but firm. This isn't just about me anymore. This is about the way people like me are treated every day, and it stops now. For a moment, the security guard stood still, unsure of how to proceed. Claire's gaze flicked from them to Maya, her earlier confidence slowly giving way to uncertainty. The situation had spiraled beyond her control. Maya had no intention of letting her off the hook now. The hotel manager's grip on the situation was slipping, but Maya wasn't done yet. She could feel the change in the air, the shift in power, and the realization that things were about to get a whole lot more complicated for Claire. Maya was ready for whatever came next, but she knew this fight had just begun. The security guards exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unsure of what to do next. They had never seen a situation like this unfold in their time working at the hotel. Usually, when someone was asked to leave, it was a simple matter of escorting them out without much fuss. But now, the atmosphere had changed completely. The tension in the air was thick, and both guards could sense it. The woman standing in front of them wasn't just any guest. She was someone they hadn't expected to encounter, a woman who clearly wasn't afraid to stand her ground. Claire, sensing her power slipping, took a sharp breath and moved to step forward, but Maya was already one step ahead. She hadn't waited for the manager's next move. Instead, she took another deep breath and locked eyes with the two security guards. "I don't know what you've been told," she began, her voice steady and confident, "but this is a mistake. I'm not going anywhere." The security guards hesitated. Maya could see it in their eyes, an internal struggle. They didn't want to get involved in this kind of mess, but their duty was clear. They were supposed to follow the manager's orders. But as Maya continued to stand there, unfazed by their presence, something seemed to shift in the way they regarded her. They weren't going to escalate the situation, not when they didn't have all the facts. "I understand you're just doing your job," Maya continued, her tone unwavering. "But this situation is about fairness and dignity. I'm not going to let someone treat me like this because they assume I don't belong." The words hung in the air. It was clear that the security guards were now caught in a moral quandary. Maya wasn't just standing up for herself. She was speaking on behalf of everyone who had ever been judged unfairly, and something about the sincerity in her voice made it impossible for the guards to ignore. They exchanged another glance, their faces softening slightly, as if they were beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. Claire was visibly rattled, her face flushed with a mix of frustration and embarrassment, as she watched the security guards hesitate. She wasn't used to this kind of resistance, especially not from a guest. Her professional composure was slipping, and she knew it. Still, her pride wouldn't let her back down. "You don't get to make the rules here," Claire snapped, trying to regain control of the situation. "Security, escort this woman out, now." Maya didn't flinch. Her eyes never left the manager's face, and she could feel the weight of every word she was about to say. "I don't think you understand who I am," Maya replied, her voice calm but firm, with just a hint of finality. "I'm the daughter of the mayor of this city, and if you think for 1 second that you can get away with treating me like this, you're gravely mistaken." Claire froze. The words seemed to hit her like a blow, her face draining of color. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She had misjudged everything. Maya hadn't just been another guest. She hadn't been just another person to humiliate. Maya was someone with power, power that Claire hadn't seen coming. For a moment, the room fell into a stunned silence. The security guards, who had been ready to act at a moment's notice, now stood still, their expressions uncertain. Claire, meanwhile, looked like she had been struck speechless. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected that the woman she had tried to throw out was someone with connections that could very well cost her job, and possibly more. Maya could feel the shift. Claire's confidence was crumbling, And for the first time, she saw the manager's true colors. She wasn't concerned with following the rules. She was concerned with maintaining her own power, her own idea of who should and shouldn't belong in the hotel. It was a mistake that was now staring her in the face. "I don't want any trouble," Claire muttered, her voice barely audible, her previous authority gone. "I didn't realize—" "You didn't realize," Maya repeated, her words deliberate, "that people like me are constantly underestimated. But you've made a big mistake today. I don't need your apology, but I do need you to understand that this won't go unnoticed." Maya's voice had softened slightly, but the intensity was still there. She wasn't just confronting Claire. She was confronting the system that allowed this kind of prejudice to persist. Claire, for all her attempts to push Maya out, had never once considered that she was wrong, that her assumptions were faulty. Maya wasn't just confronting an individual. She was confronting a mindset that needed to change. The security guards exchanged another glance, their discomfort with the situation now clear. It wasn't just about following orders anymore. They weren't going to help escort Maya out. They were caught between a manager they didn't want to disobey and a guest who clearly deserved respect. One of the guards stepped forward slowly, his eyes meeting Maya's with a hint of apology in them. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we can't get involved in this, but we're not going to make you leave. This isn't right." Maya nodded slightly, grateful for the guard's quiet support. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show that even in a moment of tension, there was still some humanity left in the situation. Claire, seeing that she had lost control, straightened her back, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Maya wasn't just the victim of poor treatment anymore. She was the one who was going to make sure this mistake didn't go unpunished. The lobby was still, the tension hanging in the air as Maya's words lingered in the space. The guests, who had been watching in silence, seemed to understand the significance of what had just occurred. Maya was no longer a guest at the mercy of the hotel staff. She was a force, and Claire had underestimated her. As Maya turned to leave the desk, her phone buzzed once more, but this time she didn't need to check it. She knew her father was on his way, and soon the full weight of his influence would descend upon the hotel. This wasn't just about her. It was about making sure no one else had to face the same treatment she had. It was about making sure this was a lesson for everyone. As Maya turned away from the desk, she could feel the eyes of the guests following her, some with sympathetic expressions, others more curious. She walked with her head held high, her steps steady. But inside, her mind was racing. The situation wasn't over yet, and she knew it. She didn't want to leave the lobby just yet, but her presence was now a quiet declaration, a statement that would linger in the air long after she walked away. The silence in the room felt heavier with each step she took. Claire had been left speechless, and now the security guards were standing at a loss, unsure of what to do. No one seemed to know how to proceed. The tension had shifted from the moment Claire had tried to eject Maya to something much larger, something that involved more than just a simple misunderstanding. Maya had put a spotlight on the behavior that too many people tolerated in silence. And now everyone was witnessing the fallout of that. Maya didn't make it far before a voice broke through the silence. "Maya, wait!" She stopped in her tracks, turning slowly to see a familiar face. It was one of the hotel guests, an older woman who had been sitting nearby, quietly observing the situation unfold. Her expression was filled with concern, but there was something else there, too, something that Maya couldn't quite place. The woman's eyes were filled with empathy, and as she stepped closer, Maya could see that she wasn't the only one who felt uncomfortable with the way she had been treated. "Are you all right?" the woman asked softly, her voice quiet enough to avoid drawing attention from the others in the lobby. Maya nodded, though the weight of the situation still lingered. "I'll be fine," she said, her voice calm but tired. She wasn't sure if she was talking about the incident or about the internal battle she was fighting in her own mind. It wasn't just about her anymore. She realized that this moment wasn't just her fight. It was a fight for anyone who had been overlooked or underestimated simply because of who they were. The older woman hesitated for a moment, her gaze drifting to the desk where Claire stood, still frozen behind it. "I saw what happened," the woman continued, her tone gentle but firm. "What she did to you wasn't right. You shouldn't have to put up with that kind of treatment." Maya's expression softened slightly, appreciating the woman's words. "Thank you," she said quietly, but her gratitude was mixed with frustration. "It shouldn't have happened in the first place. No one should be treated like that." The older woman nodded in agreement. "I've been in situations like that before," she admitted. "It's never easy, but you handled it with such grace. A lot of people would have lost their temper by now." Maya smiled faintly. She was used to being calm in moments of pressure, but there was still a part of her that wanted to lash out, to demand that the world see her as she truly was, not as they assumed her to be. But she had learned to keep her composure even when the situation seemed impossible. "I just want things to be fair," Maya replied, her voice quiet but determined. "I just want everyone to be treated with respect, that's all." The woman looked at her, a knowing expression on her face. "You're right. Respect goes a long way. People like you, people who stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, are the ones who make real change." Maya met her gaze, and for the first time since the incident had started, she felt a small sense of relief. She wasn't alone. In this moment, she had the support of at least one person who understood, even if others didn't. Just as the conversation seemed to settle, Maya's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just a simple text message. It was a call. She didn't need to check the screen. She knew exactly who it was. "I have to take this," Maya said to the woman, offering a brief, apologetic smile before stepping away to the side, keeping her voice low as she answered the phone. "Dad," she said, her heart racing in anticipation of what was about to happen. "Maya, I just heard what's been going on," her father's voice replied, calm but with an underlying note of urgency. "I'm handling it. You did the right thing by standing your ground." Maya's shoulders relaxed as she listened to his words, but there was still an edge of anger and frustration inside her. "I can't believe it, Dad. They tried to kick me out like I didn't belong, like my reservation didn't matter." Her father was silent for a moment before he spoke again, his tone firm. "That's exactly why it's so important that you spoke up. No one, no matter who they are, should ever feel like they don't belong. You did what needed to be done, Maya. I'm proud of you." Maya took a deep breath, feeling her father's support like a steady anchor. "I just want this to be over. I don't want to cause more trouble." "You're not causing trouble," her father reassured her. "You're causing change. And sometimes that's exactly what we need." Maya nodded, feeling a small but growing sense of strength in his words. The conversation lasted only a few more seconds, but the sense of calm that followed was enough to steady her nerves. Her father had always been a man of integrity and fairness, and he wasn't about to let anyone, not even someone in charge of a luxury hotel, treat his daughter with disrespect. As she ended the call and slipped her phone back into her bag, Maya stood there for a moment, taking it all in. She hadn't just stood up for herself, she had stood up for something bigger. And no matter what came next, she knew she had already made a difference. Claire, meanwhile, was still behind the desk, her expression frozen in place. The damage was done, and there was no way to undo it now. Maya had made sure of that. As Maya glanced back at the hotel manager, she saw the fear in Claire's eyes. The manager might not have realized it yet, but things were about to change. For her, for the hotel, and for everyone who had witnessed what had just transpired. The hotel lobby was eerily quiet as Maya stood by the wall, her gaze never wavering from the desk where Claire still stood, fumbling with the reservation papers in front of her. Maya could sense that the moment had shifted. There was a palpable sense of discomfort now, something Claire couldn't quite escape. The other hotel guests had begun to murmur among themselves again, but the tone of their whispers had changed. Some were clearly on Maya's side, exchanging looks of disapproval toward the manager, while others, perhaps still uncomfortable, kept to themselves. Claire, who had once projected an air of confidence and authority, now appeared nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to reassemble her composure. Maya, however, didn't look away. She could feel the weight of Claire's realization settle in. The manager's gaze kept darting back to Maya, as if trying to come up with a way to fix the situation, but no quick solution would come. It was too late for apologies now. Maya didn't need to make another point. She had already shown her strength, and now the ball was in Claire's court. The hotel manager had underestimated her, made assumptions about her based on nothing but appearance and prejudice, and now she had to deal with the consequences. The door to the hotel's back office swung open, and out stepped the general manager, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a suit that looked like it came straight from the finest boutique. His presence filled the room as he walked toward Claire, his gaze briefly flicking over to Maya. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his tone neutral, but with a hint of concern. He had likely been alerted by someone in the back about the growing tension. Claire, her face flushed with embarrassment, quickly tried to recover. "There's a misunderstanding, sir," she said quickly. "This guest is insisting she has a reservation in our premium suite, but it turns out there's some confusion with her booking. She won't leave, even though I've asked her to." Maya's gaze shifted to the general manager, who had now taken in the situation. She could see the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want to get involved, but he also couldn't ignore the tension that was hanging in the air. He looked at Maya, his eyes studying her for a moment, as if searching for some sign that she wasn't who she said she was. But Maya wasn't worried. She wasn't going to let this be swept under the rug, not after everything that had happened. "I'm Maya Williams," she said, her voice steady, but now with a quiet sense of finality. "I've booked this room. There's no mistake with my reservation, and I'm not going anywhere." The general manager's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he took in her words, but the realization struck him quickly. Maya could see the recognition in his eyes. Something about her presence, her calm demeanor, and the way she held herself told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't just any guest. She wasn't someone to be treated this way. "I see," he said, his voice shifting. He turned his attention back to Claire, his tone growing firmer. "Is this the way we treat all our guests, Claire?" Claire flinched, the weight of his words sinking in. Her earlier attempt at maintaining control was now slipping away as the general manager's disappointment became clear. She had failed miserably. The general manager turned back to Maya, his voice now apologetic. "I'm terribly sorry about this, Ms. Williams," he said. "There's been a grave misunderstanding here, and I want to make sure this is corrected immediately. I'll personally ensure that you're taken care of. Please allow me to make it right." Maya nodded, but her thoughts were still on the bigger picture. This wasn't just about her, and it never had been. This was about everyone who had ever been treated unfairly based on assumptions or prejudice. This was about making sure that people like Claire learned that their actions had consequences. Maya's calm exterior never faltered, but inside, she knew this was a turning point. It wasn't over yet, but the damage was starting to show. Claire's days in her current position were numbered, and she knew it. "I'll wait for my room to be arranged," Maya said, her voice firm but not unkind. "But I'd appreciate it if we could handle this with some dignity from now on." The general manager nodded, clearly chastened by the situation. "Of course, Ms. Williams. I'll have someone escort you to your suite immediately and see to your comfort for the rest of your stay." As the manager turned to handle the logistics, Maya felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had made her point. The situation wasn't fixed yet, but she had started something. She had raised the issue, and now the hotel was going to have to deal with it. And maybe, just maybe, this would be the catalyst for real change. The quiet hum of the hotel lobby seemed almost deafening as Maya walked to the side, her posture still confident and unshaken. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, but she didn't let it bother her. They were all witnessing something important, something that was bigger than her. Maya had no intention of letting the moment pass without making sure the right thing happened. The general manager returned quickly, this time with a staff member in tow holding a set of keys and a clipboard. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice much more respectful now, "your room has been upgraded and everything will be taken care of. I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding, and I want to assure you that we will be reviewing our staff training to ensure that something like this never happens again." Maya nodded, accepting the keys, but her expression remained unreadable. She wasn't going to let this apology be enough. It was a start, but it was far from a solution. She could already tell that the staff, including the general manager, were feeling the weight of the situation. They had witnessed the power of standing up for yourself, and it was clear that their awareness was shifting. But it wasn't just the hotel that needed to change. It was society. Prejudices like the one Claire had shown were far too ingrained, far too common. She could feel it in her bones. This moment was a seed, but it needed to grow. Maya walked toward the elevator, her steps still measured and calm. The general manager, his posture now more humble, watched her closely, his mind racing with thoughts of how to salvage the damage to his hotel's reputation. But that wasn't Maya's concern anymore. She wasn't worried about what the hotel thought of her. She was worried about how this situation would affect other people, how it would affect people who didn't have the voice to stand up the way she did. The doors to the elevator slid open, and as Maya stepped inside, she paused for a moment, glancing over her shoulder. The general manager was still standing at the desk, watching her. It was a brief moment, but it felt significant. Maya knew the ball was in his court now. Would the hotel really learn from this, or would it continue to operate as if nothing had changed? As the elevator doors closed, Maya stood tall, her thoughts turning to the future. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The real work was only beginning. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, and as the elevator ascended, Maya's reflection in the mirrored walls seemed almost distant, a stark contrast to the quiet fire still burning inside her. She had made her point. She'd taken a stand against a system that had tried to place her in a box simply because of assumptions based on her appearance. And yet, the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Maya had been calm, composed, and unyielding, but she knew that this was just one battle in a larger war for fairness and respect. As the elevator made its way to the top floor, Maya thought back to the earlier moment when she had calmly revealed her true identity. The shock that had crossed Claire's face when she realized who she was had been priceless. For a moment, Claire had been speechless, thrown off balance by the realization that Maya wasn't just any guest, but the daughter of the city's mayor. But that wasn't the point. Maya didn't want special treatment because of who her father was. She wanted to be treated like anyone else, like a human being, deserving of respect. The elevator dinged softly as it reached her floor. Maya stepped out, her heels clicking softly against the carpeted hallway. The quiet was almost peaceful compared to the tension downstairs, but it didn't last. Her thoughts were still on what had just happened, on the systemic injustice that had been exposed. She had no doubt that there were other people in the hotel, people who didn't have the means or position to stand up for themselves, who were probably facing similar mistreatment, and that reality gnawed at her. The hotel staff, including the general manager, had been caught off guard. They hadn't expected her to push back the way she had. She could tell from the way they interacted with her now, more cautiously, more deferential, that they were realizing their mistakes. But she wasn't convinced they'd learned enough yet. The change needed to go deeper. As Maya walked down the corridor toward her suite, the luxury of the hotel around her seemed almost ironic. She had fought to be treated with respect. And now, as she approached her room, she couldn't help but wonder how many other people in this very building were subjected to the same kind of prejudice without anyone noticing. How many had simply accepted the unfair treatment, walked away without making a scene, afraid to cause trouble. Maya wasn't one of those people, and she wasn't about to let it slide. Her hand rested on the door handle to her suite, but before she turned it, she paused. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She reached for it, quickly unlocking the screen. It was a text from her father. "Everything's being handled, sweetheart. Stay calm. We'll fix this together." Maya smiled faintly, her father's reassurance always giving her a sense of strength. She had learned so much from him, not just about success, but about standing up for the right things, even when the fight felt too big. She tucked the phone back into her bag, took a deep breath, and pushed open the door. Maya stepped into her suite, and for the first time all evening, she allowed herself a moment of peace. The room was as luxurious as she had expected, with its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city lights below. But somehow, the comfort of the space didn't immediately ease her mind. She had faced confrontation before, but this time felt different. This wasn't just about her, it was about challenging a culture of assumption and inequality that far too many people were conditioned to accept. She walked to the window and gazed out over the city, her mind still turning over the events that had unfolded. She couldn't stop thinking about the older woman in the lobby who had spoken to her. Her quiet words of empathy had been a small moment of kindness, and they gave Maya a renewed sense of purpose. Not everyone was willing to speak up or stand up for what's right, but in that moment, the woman had shown her that there were people who noticed, who cared, who would stand beside her, even if it wasn't easy. Maya sighed softly, brushing a hand through her hair as she looked at the reflection of the city's skyline. Her father had always said that true change came from the inside out, not just through laws or policies, but through the people who were brave enough to speak up, to challenge the status quo. Maya wasn't just standing up for herself, she was standing up for all the people who were tired of being overlooked, treated unfairly, or dismissed based on who they were. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone buzzing again. This time, it wasn't a text from her father, it was a call. She recognized the number immediately, the general manager. Maya hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what he would say. She didn't want another hollow apology, another attempt to smooth things over without actually addressing the real issue. But she took the call anyway. "Maya, this is Thomas, the general manager." His voice came through the phone, sounding much more respectful than earlier. "I just wanted to personally apologize again for the way you were treated. It was unacceptable, and I want you to know that we're taking immediate steps to address this internally. I can assure you this kind of behavior won't happen again." Maya took a deep breath, steadying herself before she spoke. "I appreciate the apology, Thomas," she said calmly, "but I don't think this is just about one incident. This isn't a problem that can be solved with a simple apology or a few changes in policy. This is about an attitude, a mindset that goes deeper than one hotel employee." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I understand," Thomas said finally. "We'll be taking your concerns seriously. We're starting diversity and inclusion training tomorrow for the entire staff. This is something that needs to be addressed at every level." Maya nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "Good," she said firmly. "This isn't just about one person, Thomas. It's about making sure no one else has to face the same kind of treatment. No one should have to feel like they don't belong." "I agree," he replied, his voice sincere. "We'll do better, Maya. Thank you for your patience." Maya didn't say much more, but there was a quiet sense of satisfaction in her chest. The general manager had heard her, and for once, it felt like things were truly going to change. She ended the call, slipping her phone back into her bag, and took one last look out the window. The night sky was clear, the city lights twinkling below her like a sea of stars. Maya wasn't done. She had just begun to push for the change that was long overdue, but at least now she had taken the first steps. The next few days passed slowly, the echoes of the incident still lingering in the back of Maya's mind. The hotel had promised to implement changes, but she wasn't entirely convinced that things would be different by the time she left. However, she knew she had planted a seed, and now it was up to the hotel management to water it. Maya wasn't going to wait for them to catch up. She had received a call from her father telling her that he had already begun making inquiries about the hotel's policies and had offered his support to make sure things moved quickly. That reassured her a little. Maya knew that her father's involvement meant that the hotel wouldn't be able to ignore the situation. As the days went on, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was unfolding. The events had set off a ripple effect, not just in the hotel, but in her own life as well. This experience had been a turning point. She had always been passionate about fairness, but now she felt a deeper responsibility to fight for it. It wasn't just a matter of personal justice. It was about ensuring that everyone, no matter their background, had a seat at the table. And so Maya decided that when she returned home, she would take her advocacy even further. This was just the beginning. There was much work to do, and Maya was ready to do it. As she packed her bags on the last day of her stay, Maya looked back at the hotel one final time. It had been a challenging experience, but it had also been an empowering one, and she knew that she would leave a little different than when she had arrived, stronger, more confident, and more determined to keep pushing for the change the world so desperately needed. The day of departure arrived faster than Maya had anticipated. As she sat in the luxurious hotel lobby, her bags beside her, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction mixed with lingering curiosity. She had come here to relax, to unwind, but what she had ended up with was so much more. It wasn't just about the luxury suite or the city views anymore. The hotel had become a symbol of something much larger. It represented a microcosm of the everyday injustices people faced. For Maya, it was now a reminder of her own power to challenge what was wrong and how sometimes the most unexpected places held the biggest lessons. She glanced around the lobby, noticing the hotel staff more closely now. There were no signs of the tension from earlier, no more whispered exchanges or awkward stares. It seemed as if the incident had been swept under the rug, but Maya knew better. She wasn't about to let the issue disappear quietly. The general manager had kept his promise. The diversity and inclusion training for the staff had begun, and Maya had received word that it was being taken seriously. The hotel had even announced publicly that they were revamping their customer service policies with a focus on respect and professionalism for all guests, regardless of their background. The changes were slow, but they were there, and Maya could feel a small sense of accomplishment from knowing that she had contributed to that shift. But as the clock ticked closer to her departure, Maya still couldn't shake the feeling that she had more work to do. She wasn't finished with the battle yet. This was just one small victory in the larger war for equality and respect. She picked up her phone and sent a quick text to her father. "I've learned a lot this week. Thank you for supporting me." Her father's reply was swift, as always. "You did well, Maya. Keep pushing. This isn't over." The message made her smile, and for a brief moment she allowed herself to feel the weight of everything she had learned during her stay. The fight for fairness wasn't easy. It would never be just one moment or one victory. But Maya knew that every step, no matter how small, was a step toward change, and that gave her the resolve to keep going. Maya's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from the general manager, Thomas. She had expected him to reach out before she left, but hearing from him now only reminded her of how far things had come in such a short time. "Maya, I wanted to personally thank you again for your patience and understanding throughout this whole ordeal," Thomas said, his voice sounding warmer than it had when they first spoke. We've made some significant changes to our staff training and procedures, and I wanted to let you know that you've made a lasting impact here. People are already talking about what happened, and there's a noticeable shift in how our team is approaching customer service. I hope you can see that." Maya smiled faintly, leaning back against the plush chair as she listened. "I'm glad to hear that," she replied, her voice steady. "But let's not forget that this isn't just about a single incident. It's about creating an environment where everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from, feels welcome and respected." "I agree," Thomas said. "We're committed to doing better. I'll be personally overseeing the implementation of these changes." "Thank you again, Maya. We're lucky to have had a guest like you point us in the right direction." The sincerity in his voice was enough to reassure her, but Maya wasn't fooled. She knew that real change would take time, and that it was her job to keep pushing for it. "I appreciate your efforts, Thomas," she said. "But remember, it's not enough to talk about it. It's about action. Make sure it lasts." "I promise, Maya. We're committed to making this right." Maya ended the call with a quiet sense of fulfillment. It wasn't over, but it was a start. The hotel wasn't the only place that needed change. The world outside had so much further to go, but in that moment, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Change could happen. It just took courage, patience, and a willingness to stand up when others wouldn't. And she was more than ready for whatever came next. As she made her way to the hotel lobby to check out, Maya took one last look around. The grand lobby, the smiling staff, the polished floors, everything seemed so normal, so serene. But underneath it all, there was a quiet revolution happening. Maya knew that her actions had caused a ripple, and that ripple would continue to spread, whether anyone noticed it or not. It wasn't about grand gestures or instant results. It was about starting the conversation. It was about making sure that no one, no matter their race, gender, or background, would ever feel out of place simply because of assumptions and prejudice. As she walked out the door, the city before her looked the same as it had when she arrived. But for Maya, everything had changed. And with that, she knew she was ready for the next chapter. Maya's flight back home was quiet, her mind still processing everything that had happened. As she looked out the window, the vastness of the sky seemed to reflect the possibilities ahead. She was heading back to her life, but she felt like a different person, stronger, more aware, more determined. The events of the past week had forced her to confront not just the prejudices of others, but also her own role in creating the change she wanted to see. She had always believed in fairness, in justice, but now she had seen firsthand how powerful it could be to stand up, to speak out, and to demand what was right. She wasn't waiting for someone else to make the world better. She was going to be the one to make that difference. When her plane finally touched down, the sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the city below. Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose stir within her. This wasn't just about one hotel, one manager, or one moment. This was about creating a world where people were judged by their character, not by assumptions about their background. She had made her mark, but the real work was only just beginning. As Maya stepped off the plane and into the waiting car, she glanced out the window at the city she called home. There was so much to do, so much to change. But now, more than ever, Maya felt ready. She wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to stop fighting for what was right. This was just the beginning, and she was determined to keep pushing until the world was the place it should be for everyone. Maya spent the next few weeks reflecting on everything that had happened, using the time to channel her newfound strength into something more productive. She began researching organizations focused on racial justice, diversity, and inclusion, feeling more compelled than ever to get involved. Her heart told her this was bigger than just an individual issue. It was a systemic one. She reached out to local groups, offering her voice and perspective on the importance of advocating for fairness in all spaces, from hotels to schools to workplaces. Meanwhile, the hotel continued to follow through on its promises, sending her a letter of thanks for her role in initiating such important changes. It wasn't much, but it was a step in the right direction. Maya appreciated the acknowledgement, but she wasn't looking for thanks. Her fight was never about recognition. It was about justice. Maya's phone buzzed one afternoon as she was wrapping up a meeting with a local advocacy group. It was Thomas, the general manager from the hotel. "Maya, I just wanted to update you on some of the improvements we've made here," he said. "We've launched a new series of workshops for all staff, focused on unconscious bias and customer service. We're also putting a new policy in place to ensure that incidents like the one you experienced are never repeated." Maya's lips curled into a small smile. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. "Thank you, Thomas," she replied. "I'm glad to hear that. Keep pushing. Don't let up." "I won't," he promised, and Maya knew he meant it. As time passed, the ripple effect from the hotel incident became more apparent. Maya's story had reached others, inspiring people to speak up when they saw injustice, even in the smallest moments. She began to receive messages from people who had experienced similar treatment and were now motivated to challenge the biases they faced. Maya realized that one action could lead to a much larger wave of change, one that spread beyond her own experience and touched lives she'd never even imagined. The feeling of empowerment grew stronger every day. She was no longer just a woman who had been wronged. She was someone who could use her voice to make a difference. Months later, Maya stood in front of a crowd at a diversity conference, speaking about her experience at the hotel. She had become an advocate, using her story as a tool to educate others about prejudice and the importance of empathy. As she shared her journey, the audience responded with rapt attention. Maya wasn't just sharing her own struggles. She was shedding light on the struggles of countless others who had faced discrimination in silence. The applause that followed wasn't just for her. It was for the change that was beginning to take shape. Maya had learned that no matter how small the victory seemed at first, it was the beginning of something much larger. And as she stepped off the stage, she knew that this was only the start. The fight for fairness would continue, and Maya would be right there, leading the charge.